For we bequeath a parting tip of sound advice for such men who come across in transport ships to polish off the Dutchmen. If you encounter any Boers, you really must not loot them. And if you wish to leave these shores, for pity's sake, don't shoot them. Let's toss a bumper down our throat before we pass to heaven, and toast the trim-set petticoat we leave behind in Devon.
Shoot straight, you bastards! Don't make a mess of it!
A lecture was given in the Castlemaine Town Hall and reported on the 24th of August 1901. The lecture given by C.J. McKenna. Lieutenant McKenna, who was received with cheers, said he did not claim to be a professional lecturer nor a war correspondent possessing picturesque language. He merely spoke as a soldier who had been requested by many townspeople to lecture on the siege. He described Mafeking as a small town about twice the size of Taradale, situated in an isolated position surrounded by a large plain. Prior to the siege, it contained a population of 1,000 whites. Little farmhouses that were around had been obliterated. On a blackboard he drew a sketch of Mafeking and its defences. Early in 1899 there was some talk of war, and in time several officers arrived, and in July Baden-Powell came and set about the defences. In October the Bechuanaland Rifles, the regiment to which he belonged, was called out. Some of the Boers came to see them and had a trial at the rifle range. At length the papers were printing the crisis. Baden-Powell called out the town guard and had men enrolled. Next thing the Boers came round and made seizures, whereupon Baden-Powell sent out a squadron which had a fight that was reported as a great victory, but this was not true. A man came in with a white flag and said he was sent by Cronje to say that unless they surrendered they would be shelled, but Baden-Powell said he would not surrender. So next day Cronje commenced to shell the town, which was a novel and unpleasant experience to them, as the shells made such a disturbing noise. Another message came to surrender, but Baden-Powell coolly replied, "When is the bloodshed to commence?" Later on a shell came into the hotel in the town, which tore up the building. A war correspondent brought in a fragment of the shell about half a pound in weight, whereupon another war correspondent asked, "Why the devil did you bring that here?" Laughter from the crowd. After this, the women and children were sent by train from Mafeking, to their great distress and to that of their husbands. He pointed out by means of the blackboard the position that the Boers took up. Baden-Powell ordered out a squadron to try the bayonet upon them and take a fort, but the Boers were too well protected to have a bayonet put through them. A fanciful account was given of this encounter as a great victory for the British Army. A farmer named Keeley asked permission to go to his farm where Lady Wilson resided, which was granted, and a plan was devised to let 200 tons of dynamite be sent by railway, and for the engineer driver to uncouple his engine and let the Boers fire into the dynamite, which would explode, and which was done. Upon Keeley being asked of this by the Boers how the British threw away so much dynamite, he replied that Mafeking was so full of it that they wanted to get rid of it. This frightened the Boers when they saw what they might expect if entering Mafeking. The defenders found security from bullets and shells by keeping in the dugouts. They had 2 7-pounders which were pointed at the Boer forts from concealed places that had caused much smoke, and drew fire from the Boer guns. After telling some amusing incidents, he gravely told how the Boers fired a convent though a red flag was hoisted over it on Christmas Eve when the religious ceremony was being conducted. He narrated how a squadron attacked a fort but were unable to enter the stronghold. They lost 20 men by this engagement, who were so mangled it was hard to identify them. He explained how the bayonet was not so good a weapon as the spade, as the latter secured safety and was effective in gaining a position of defence. Being much annoyed by the fire from a Boer fort, they dug a trench to a fort, which enabled the soldiers to pass from the fort to the town for provisions. K's were employed to dig trenches, the strategic directions of which he drew on the board, and all this was effected without the loss of life. These trenches were cut so as to command the Boer fort, but the Boers also dug a trench that met theirs. They were within 40 yards of the Boer fort, which did not so much smart firing. They could speak to the Boers at that distance. The Cape boys, he said, were fond of music, and called out to the Boers they were having a dance, but wanted women, whereupon a Boer raised up his head, but was soon shot dead by the K's companion. Laughter from the crowd. By the work of the spade they drove the Boers out of their strong fort, which was accomplished with little loss of life. Here Mr. Veery showed his light views. The first was Baden-Powell, and the next was that of the Australians at Mafeking. A few others were exhibited the personages in which the lecturer explained. After this came an interval. On resuming, Lieutenant McKenna proceeded to describe the devices employed by the garrison against their chief enemy, hunger. After the early expectation of relief had vanished, troops were put on half rations. This consisted of 1 pound of beef and 2 biscuits for 4 men for a whole day's rations. Then the beef gave out, and they took to minced horseflesh, and a brawn made of chopped hides, sowens, or a porridge made of husks of oats, the husks after this treatment being made into buns. Locusts made fair eating, having a taste like compressed vegetables. The lecturer gave a complete refutation of the statement now circulating in some Australian journals that there was plenty of food in the town when it was relieved. The origin of the story is due to the fact that Colonel Baden-Powell had rigidly reserved 1 day's full rations for the whole of the troops in case they should at some time be forced to make a last dash to cut their way out. This amount, 1,000 rations, was generously given to the relieving troops, and for 9 days after the relief of the garrison still subsisted on siege rations, which at this time contained as provisions per day for 5 men in the lecturer's own mess a piece of horse meat, or chervil as they called it, about 6 inches square and half an inch in thickness. The capture of Eloff on the 12th of May offered a dramatic theme to the lecturer, who vividly described how that night on the outposts he heard the old song of Rule Britannia swing through the night from fort to fort in their line of defence. The relief which came 5 days later finally ended the strain. The lecturer, concluding his address, was rewarded with a long-continued applause, and Mr. Very then exhibited a series of South African war pictures with his accustomed skill. Presentation of medals amid great cheering. The Major presented Lieutenant McKenna with a gold medal similar to those received lately by the Castlemaine members of the 1st Contingent. The recipient, in responding, expressed his deep gratitude for having gained the esteem of his fellow townspeople. Mr. Jas Newman then moved a vote of thanks to the lecturer, which was carried on with enthusiasm. After a vote of thanks to the Mayor, the audience dispersed. Huzzah! 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 Hi. Okay, so we're at our second stop, a little place called Nathalia, sort of up the top corner of Victoria, not too far from the Murray River, which is the boundary with New South Wales, the border. So I don't think I've ever been here before. There would be no reason for me to be here. There is a big forest called Barmer Forest, but I doubt I would have come up for that. You never know, I might have come through here on one of my excursions as a teen. Had friends that liked shooting, so we used to go all over Victoria on these little trips. But anyway, let's I'm just sort of opposite, sort of a bit of a monument, so we'll go and have a look and see if that's anything to do with the Boer War. As you can see, Australia lost so many men in the Great War. Oh, here we go, look at this. Boer War, 1899 and 1902. Erected in memory of Alex W. Draper of, oh, there's one for us to research, Babraint's horse, who died in South Africa during the Boer War in the service of the Empire. on the 11th of February 1901. So we'll look up Babrin's horse. Now remember, we've come across a couple of these, haven't we? We've come across, they're like private little contingents raised by almost like entrepreneurs. Remember the one in Brunswick, they were offering free booty. If you joined up, you could join for 3 or 6 months. You know, maybe they were for people that really didn't have much military training, just adventurers who wanted to go and take a few pot shots at the Boers. They must have thought it'd be easy when they first signed up. They must have thought the Boers would be a pushover. As it got more complicated and they needed more men, that might have been a way to shortcut all the training and enlisting and all that. Go and join a private contingent. This one is called, as I said, Babrin's horse by the look of it. So I found a little bit about Brabant. Brabant's horse was raised by Major General Sir Edward Ewald Brabant, who lived from 1839 to 1914, and he was a British military commander in colonial South Africa. He served in the 9th Xhosa War, the First Matabele War, and other campaigns. During the Second Boer War, he commanded the Colonial Division in 1900 and the Colonial Defence Force of Cape Colony in 1901. Now, Brabant's horse. On the 5th of November 1899, Brabant raised the light horse regiment known as Brabant's Horse. The top strength of the unit was 600, all ranks, including South African colonials, Australians, British, Canadians, and the unit saw much action against Boer commandos. Brabant's Horse was disbanded in Cape Town on the 31st of December 1901, and in 1901 he was knighted as a Knight Commander of the Order of the Bath for his services in South Africa. In this photo I found of Major General Brabant, he's wearing a black armband, and I wonder if that's because his son was killed in the defence of Ladysmith. So we'll have a look at that. Well, that was pretty easy to find, wasn't it? So now we're going to go across to Echuca, which is actually on the Murray. We're probably about 5 or 10k from the Murray here in beautiful little Nathalia. Sunday morning, not many people out, but sun's out, it's gorgeous, it's winter, but it's one of those gorgeous blue sky winter days we get when we're lucky. Now before we leave Nathalia, I'll show you the Courthouse Hotel because I think it's a cracker. Yeah, I'm just back in, I'm trying to get a park. There's a couple of interesting places here in Nathalia. That looks like the old post office. This is a hotel I wanted to show you, the Courthouse, 1876. Really nice, old, all boarded up. I said let's have a look inside maybe. Real historical hotel. I know we're kind of here for Boer War monuments, but I don't want to bore you all. Excuse the pun. But look at this place. Look at the banisters. I don't know whether those gates are original. That's fantastic. I doubt it's operational. The courthouse. The old stained glass windows. Oh, look at this. You're not going to get this apart from these country towns. Look at that window. Tolly's Brandy Parlour.
Who the hell drinks in a parlour anymore? Look at that door. Wow. Tolly's Brandy, that's the bar. Maybe it's because I'm a reformed alcoholic. I'm fascinated with old hotels. There's a light on in there, I think. The Beanley Rum sign. Yeah, maybe it's still open. Maybe it still operates. Yeah, this is lovely. Alright, well that is the Courthouse Hotel in Nathalia. There'll be a hell of a lot of history here. The museum, cemetery over down there. But unfortunately, I don't really have a lot of time when I do these day trips to linger. Okay, so next stop will be Echuca.